Hey there, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Austin Tech Connect. This is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council, and this podcast is brought to you by Calavista Software. Software development without the drama. Since 2001, Calavista Software has been trusted by startups and Fortune 100 companies alike to help customize their software needs. You can check them out at calavistasoftware.com. And thank you to them for being the sponsor of this podcast. So today we are rejoined by a guest who also happens to be a board member of the Austin Technology Council, Ronnie Sheth. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tom. Great to be here again.
So glad to have you. So for those of you who don't know Ronnie, and you really should, if you live in Austin and you work around AI and data, you should know who she is. She helps companies design human-first experiences using these disruptive technologies around data and AI. And she dives in and helps companies sort of figure out what's going on, where they are, and where they should be going. Because the one thing we don't want to do in this crazy world is we don't want to waste time and resources when we're going through the changes that are happening in our business world. So Ronnie, let's start off really quick by let's talk in a little bit about why are you a volunteer for the Austin Technology Council? Why are you on our board? Why do you support what we do?
That is a great question to start with, Tom. And apart from the fact that I absolutely thoroughly love Austin as a city and as a community, I find the mission and the vision of Austin Technology Council compelling. And you put it wonderfully that we are here as connectors, as ecosystem builders. We are here to bring people together as Austin Technology Council, to build the technology community, to build up the city really as a shining example of what a city can do with technology when you all come together. You know, we have so many wonderful players in the community that, you know, focus on startups and large companies, and Austin Technology Council wants to bring all of them together and is bringing all of them together for open dialogues, for partnerships, for collaboration, to really create a healthy, thriving community. That's what I believe in. That's my passion. And that's the reason why I'm on ATC board.
Well, and we appreciate all that you do. And we're trying to be that thread that connects everybody who is part of tech, supports tech, etc. Now, it's interesting because you haven't lived in Austin necessarily that long. What brought you here and how long have you been here?
So I have been here since late 2017, and I would not change it for the world.
So why Austin then?
Yes. So interestingly, when I was at IBM and I started Senin as a side hustle that, you know, I was talking to one of our partners and they were working with a company in Austin. And that company wanted to really prepare themselves for exit. And it was one of the portfolio companies of a very, very prominent VC firm here. I came here, I met them, we hit it off. And so here we are.
Nice. So you've seen a lot of changes even since 2017. Where do you think Austin has changed the most in the 7-8 years that you've been here?
One of the biggest changes that I've seen in Austin is that we have been a magnet for people, not only in technology, but talent overall. I would say American talent, but also international talent, right? I have seen companies take such great interest in my travels. Oh, hey, you're from Austin. Great city. I've heard so much about it. Tell us a little bit more. This is a change from 2017, from 2018, from 2019. Today, when I go out and I say I'm from Austin, I see this sparkle in people's eyes and they're like, I've heard about that city. That's the biggest change I've seen.
Yeah, that's absolutely one of the things that I've seen as well in the last several years is that Austin has become this well-known city internationally, but also we've become a destination city for all of these companies who want to open up a U.S. headquarters. So very often the Chamber of Commerce or Opportunity Austin or other groups will call me in with the Austin Technology Council to meet with these groups. And there's people from Eastern Europe, from Asia, from South America, from Australia. There's people from all over the world who are really looking at Austin because we're in the center of the country, because we have this great vibe, because we're a great place to relocate your family. I'm seeing a lot of those same things too. So I think the future is bright for Austin as this international tech hub. What do you think?
I fully agree. I fully agree.
Nice. Well, the reason I wanted to have you on the show today was really I wanted to talk about what are companies really doing when it comes to AI. There's been a lot of reports, the last couple of years, you can't pick up a newspaper or log on to your favorite news site without everything being AI this, AI that, AI this, AI that. And there's been some reports lately that basically say that, yes, we've been moving very fast, but are people implementing it? Are they getting the results they want? Is it producing, economies of scale that we were expecting this fast? This is your world. You work deeply in this world of data and AI. So let's just throw it out there broadly. What are you seeing?
That's a very, very poignant question, Tom, and a well-timed one. Because if you have read the news at all, the US Census Bureau came out with a report that talks about AI adoption. And the report, in effect, states that it is falling among large companies, let's say 250 plus employees. So initially, or at least earlier in the year, it was about 13.4%, and now it's fallen to 11%. If I look at that report and I combine those statistics with a report that MIT came out with earlier that says, hey, by the way, companies are really not seeing returns from their generative AI pilots. About 95% of generative AI pilots fail. There's some truth to all of this, right? So what we're seeing right now is initially when ChatGPT came out, when generative AI first came out, there was a lot of, look, we want to do AI, and I am using quotes. We want to do AI. How do we adopt AI? How do we implement AI? There was a lot of buzz around this. There was a lot of FOMO around this. And companies started doing pilots and look, we're going to use AI here, we're going to use AI there. But the problem was they didn't actually think through embedding AI in their organization. What is the strategy? What is broken? What is the stuff that you need to fix first before even thinking about AI? These are the questions that were not asked. So of course, the pilots are going to fail because number one, you have not thought through how it's going to impact the organization, how it's going to impact your employees. What is adoption going to look like? What does scale even mean when you think about scaling this pilot? What does that actually look like in your organization, and does it make sense? Right? These are the questions that we're coming back to. So in effect, the statistics are actually correct, in my opinion, but for a very different reason than people think. It's not that AI has lost its color for companies, but I think there is some level of practicality coming back in. Now, even though board level discussions still include AI, companies that we talk to, large corporations, mid-sized corporations that we talk to, they still want to implement AI, but now they're looking at AI as a tool in the long-term strategy. Look, we want to make a difference. We want to be more productive. We want to make our lives easier, our employees' lives easier. We want to improve decision-making accuracy, right? These are still the same questions, but now they're taking a step back and saying, okay, hold on a second. Is anything broken? Do we need to fix something first? And usually it comes back to data.
Well, it's interesting because you were talking about all that, and I was thinking about data, because if we go back in the time machine to 2017, 18, 19, the big buzzword was all about big data. Everybody was, collecting all of this data and doing stuff with this data, but there wasn't a lot, unless you were a big company who had a lot of resources, that you could do with a lot of the data that you were collecting. And when AI came along, it was like this marriage, of like, kaboom, now the AI can go into the data. But are people actually getting more out of their data because of the AI already, or what do they have to do?
On average, The answer is no. People are not getting more out of their data because people are not ready for AI, right? The greatest revelation that people had with the rise of AI, if I may say, is, hey, we are not ready for AI. We are not ready for AI. And again, I go back to the report, hence the drop, because now we're moving back to we need to build a foundation for AI. And what is that foundation? Robust data, high quality, consistently high quality data that then feeds into these AI models, which then provide accurate outputs. Right? So it goes back to really focusing on improving the quality of data, the integrity of data, the fidelity of data, and really bringing that back into the AI conversation once that foundation is built and ready for AI.
So your expertise, when I first met you, pre kind of AI boom, was around big data and everything that's going on there. I'll be really honest. It's a buzzword to me. And I think a lot of people listening, when we hear the idea of, oh, we need better data, we need robust data. Could you go a little deeper and describe what we mean in a corporate setting by their data and how they can utilize it? I think it's just a word to a lot of us that, oh, I know what data is, but what is it really, Ronnie?
Yeah, good question. Look, we get so much information, and I'm going to stay away from the word data, but we get so much information, right? We are working with many different companies. We work with retail, we work with CPG, we work with energy, we work with construction. And in general, the word data can mean different things when it comes to nuances. Let me give you an example. Retail, you're working a lot with loyalty, membership. So you have people data, right? These are our members. This is their engagement. This is their purchases, right? They have been loyal with us. They have been with our brand for 3 years, 5 years. This is all of their history. Retail data, right? And also applies to CPG. In construction, these are all of our projects. These are our customers. These are our contracts. These are our employees, because safety is a big deal. So these are our employees. This is our safety data, our quality data, our training data. That's for construction. So while data is a loose word, it's really the information that you work with in your organizations, that you make decisions from. Do you remember, Tom, there was this time when people were talking about being data-driven and data-centric, right? What does that mean? What does that actually mean? To me, being data-driven, being data-centric meant that you are actually using your data asset that you are collecting, that you're gathering in a meaningful, purposeful, intentional way for decision-making.
So meaningful and intentional is probably the thing that I think probably a lot of companies are missing, right? I mean, collecting data is collecting data, but if you're not strategic about it, earlier you talked about what is the strategy. And I think just, having been a side student of business for, 30 years, I think a lot of companies miss the strategy piece, right? I mean, when we look at companies like Good to Great, type companies that were profiled in that book, they looked at two companies that were the same, and one goes up and one stays the same. And I think a lot of it was not knowing who you are and where you're going and not having that strategy on how to get there. So how do we get companies to embrace a strategy around data that leads into utilizing AI?
Good question. So Seddon has worked across the board with different companies. And normally the realization comes at different times. So we talked about AI, and look, we're not ready for AI because our data foundation is not ready, right? That's one. The other thing that we tend to hear a lot is we need data governance. And it was very surprising initially to have this conversation around we need data governance. And I said, why? Why do you need data governance? What is the reason today, now, why do you need data governance? And most people didn't realize that when they're talking about data governance, they actually meant data strategy, right? Because when we work with, for example, construction and manufacturing, they don't have too many regulations as opposed to healthcare and financial services. And I've created a framework where we talk about the data governance strategy classification. And I'm going to give you a quick example. So we've got 4 quadrants in there. I've got defensive, offensive, composite, and causal. Now, causal is, look, you're just being thrown around by regulation and innovation, and you have no clue what you're doing, but at the same time, you want to do something with data, right? So you're trying in your governance strategy. Defensive is when you have very, very high regulation. So think healthcare, think financial services, they have very high regulation. So you're defensive in the sense that because there is regulation, you want to protect yourself. You want to comply with the regulation. You want to protect yourself from data breaches. You want to protect yourself from data loss. You want to protect yourself from fines and in compliance. Then there's the offensive part in data governance, which is really focused on, look, we don't have too much regulation, but we are laser focused on innovation. That's offensive data governance strategy. And then there's the composite, which is retail. For a company, a retail company, a large retail company or a CPG company, they have regulations around making sure that PII data is taken care of. But at the same time, if they don't innovate, they're dead in the water because retail is a very, very competitive space. So when we talk about things like this, you can hear some of the reasons why people come to us for data governance. When they hear risk, when they hear compliance, these are the reasons that they focus on data governance. But what we have invariably found is we don't deal directly with data governance. We have to start with data strategy. Look, what are your use cases? What are you trying to do with data, right? Most of the times we find that that is not really defined accurately or defined well in an organization because either they're trying to do a lot with data or they don't know where they can really impact their organization if they use data. So that's where we hear data governance as one of the drivers for strategy, right? And then there are other areas as well that, they really truly say, look, we want accurate reporting. We want analytics. And we really have no clue how to take all of these vast amounts of data and bring it into sort of the structured format where we can actually improve decision making. So again, I'm giving you a flavor, but there are so many reasons why people come to us and they say, look, we need help with data. And that's where you get into the strategy conversation of, look, let's develop a vision for data. Let's develop a vision, and this is the word I use, for data excellence in your organization, right? You will never be perfect because data is never perfect, right? You always will have some inaccuracies, some errors with data, but at the same time, if you can strive for data excellence as your North Star and you define what data excellence is in your organization, you can have a very specific goal in mind to use data.
So when I think of like companies that are really good at sort of this whole idea of data and being strategic around their data, I tend to think the enterprise level companies or companies that are sort of at that next level that are heavy growth, larger companies. Do small and mid-sized companies do a good job with data, or are they just winging it?
I do believe that the maturity level when it comes to data and data capability is higher in larger companies. However, I wouldn't say that mid-sized companies are winging it because they have started to give thought, because remember that big data, even as a buzzword, has been around for at least a decade, if not more. So when we think about that and when we put that into perspective, mid-sized companies really have come a long way into leveraging data for decision making. But if you throw in other disruptive enablers like artificial intelligence, that's where things get a little shaky for companies because they're not ready for their data to truly be used for the next phase of transformation, of growth, of innovation, of risk management. And that's where, even today, if you go to a mid-sized company, Tom, you will still find companies using their data and putting their data in Tableau for insights, or putting their data in Excel, worst case scenario, small companies for insights. But there is still some level of insights for decision making. Now, whether it's comprehensive, whether it's accurate, whether that's the way that they should go, again, not sure about that, but there's still some level of thought into how to use data. So not quite winging it, still better than winging it, but not ideal state, if I may say so.
So you were talking before about regulations, and obviously healthcare, finance, there's certain industries that are heavily regulated when it comes to the data because of protection and wanting to protect the individuals whose data are held by that company. But regulations go even farther because governments are starting to step in when we get into this world of AI. And the EU has passed, a bill. Colorado passed a bill that's kind of been pulled back and stuff, but would have affected companies that did business anywhere in the United States. In fact, all of the states, we have to be careful. If a state passes a rule, it kind of affects everybody. So, California's gone down this path. What do we have to be thinking about when it comes to this government regulation around sort of big blanket AI?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer it two ways, one for data and one for AI. In fact, I believe a couple of days ago, just last week, a Canadian court ordered a company to provide data from France that was stored in France. So if we think about data sovereignty and data privacy, think about what that does to the data sovereignty and privacy conversation for companies, right? Because the whole point of GDPR and the whole point of Europe's regulation was, hey, look, this data is not going to go out to the rest of the world. It's protected here. Well, what if a Canadian court says, or a US court going forward says, this is our jurisdiction, this case is here, and you're going to need to bring your data here? How does that play globally, right? So when you think about mid-sized multinational companies, when you think about large companies playing in different markets, different geographies, very different ballgame now, right? So we are actually at an inflection point right now, Tom. If I think about things sort of today and in the future, we're at an inflection point where regulations will change and will continue to change and evolve. So the way that we want to think about things is we have an option. Do we globalize data or do we localize data, right? If we globalize data, what regulations apply to us and how are they going to change? If we localize data, what regulations are going to apply to us and how are they going to change, right? So if I'm just a US company and I just have US clients, I should be fairly okay as long as I make sure that I understand all of the different state regulations and federal regulations around data. And as long as I am very, very clear on what I am complying with, right? And who I'm working with, who are my customers and my employees and my partners. Globally, that is exponentially hard at this point, especially in light of what happened with the Canadian court last week. So my thought, and this is a conversation that I will have with my peers, but my thought is our greatest goal, whether you think about data and even in AI, is how do you as a company and as a brand not only protect yourself, but protect your customers, your employees, your partners, and your community, the people that you work with, right? What does that look like when you think about data and AI? Are you protecting their data from being breached if it's stored in your company, right? Are you protecting their information? Are you selling their information? Or are you truly protecting their information? If you're making money off of their information, if you're monetizing their information, do they know about it, right? Be ethical, be transparent, be clear, and be responsible with people's data assets, right? Because data is an asset. Data is an asset, right? That asset can depreciate, that asset can be obsolete, right? That asset can also turn into a liability if you don't treat it well, and responsibly and ethically. And I have seen that happen many times over with companies, right? So treat data as an asset, treat data responsibly, ethically, treat your AI models that actually work with all of this data, responsive, develop them, design them, work with them ethically and responsibly. Make sure that you understand, hey, where is this data coming from? How is it being processed? Where is it going? Is there bias? Is there anything that is detrimental to our customers, to our employees, right? Is there enough diversity? Are we representing our customer base properly, right? We're not leaving out certain things and we're not adding useless things in our AI models, right? These are the kinds of conversations that really need to happen when you're working with data and AI now. Because otherwise, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to end up isolating yourself in the next 2 to 3 years when it comes to your community, to your customers, users, partners, right? Because they're going to start seeing, hey, you're not telling us how you're using our data. You're not telling us how your AI models actually work with our data that we own in reality and you have and you're storing, right? So these are conversations that will continue over the next little while, evolve over the next little while. But in reality, I wouldn't worry about regulation as much as making sure that you're responsible and ethical.
So we started off talking about how, sort of the implementation and the adoption of AI is not speeding up. It's slowing down. I've had a bunch of conversations lately with, and in my world, more smaller, mid-sized companies, but who haven't really implemented stuff. They're playing with it. They're using the Chat GPT or the Claude for stuff, but they haven't really got into this whole world of agents and everything else. Very few people were saying, oh yeah, it's totally doing everything for us. Now, I did talk to somebody in a larger company who said they're rolling this stuff out, but what they're really doing is teaching their managers how to manage teams where other people will be managing agents. Because at the end of the day, a human's going to have to be responsible for, some of the decisions that are being made. At the end of the day, we can't just have your agent talk to my agent and they create a podcast and we're not even here. I mean, the people still need to get involved to make things happen. What are you seeing from this sort of side with your clients and with others on the implementation? Lots of toe in the water. Where are we and what are you kind of telling your clients to do next?
Yeah. So I find invariably that when larger companies or even mid-sized companies have gone gung-ho on AI, we come back to the adoption problem, right? There's a lot of acceleration on, hey, we want to implement and use AI, certainly. But I don't think that any company can really say, look, we've got AI implemented and adopted at scale in our organization. Right? I think it would be a very, very, very rare case. Right now, what we're seeing is companies trying still to adopt generative AI use cases. Agentic AI, they're dipping their toes in the water, right? Most companies. In rare cases, maybe there's a division of a company that has agentic AI workflows. Maybe there's a workflow around supply chain optimization. Maybe there's a workflow around pricing, especially as we talk about, manufacturing, transportation, logistics, right? There are certain types of workflows. Retail can have some workflows, but we are not seeing that enterprise-wide is what I'm trying to say, right? Maybe there's a specific use case where a workflow is working and they're testing and they're trying to see if, we can adopt this at scale, right, through the enterprise. But I've not seen an enterprise, especially when it comes to agentic AI, adopt it yet at scale. Generative AI, it's a little bit better than agentic because remember, agentic sort of is the new wave. Generative is a little bit better, but people are still struggling to apply generative AI across the board, right? There are certain use cases for generative AI that we all know. There are technologies that we can adopt, but if you adopt a technology, that's not called adopting generative AI. When you embed generative AI as a tool in your process or your workflow, that's adopting generative AI. And that's what people are struggling with, right? As far as ML goes, Like traditional AI, I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and people have done a lot there, and they are still doing a lot there.
So as we kind of get to wrapping this up, what else should people be thinking about? What do you wish that everybody was talking about when it comes to AI and data as we're looking to the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? You know, what are you just screaming in the mirror saying, why don't they know about this or talk about this?
I had a revelation a few months ago, and that is AI really is a collection of humanity, right? It's a collection of humanity's intelligence, emotions, thoughts, habits, mindsets, behaviors, right? We can find all of this knowledge. We can find all of this in AI today. What AI is missing is the prescription. So I come from the analytics space. Analytics, anybody in analytics, they should be able to say this to you in their sleep. You've got 4 types of analytics. You've got descriptive, you've got diagnostic, you've got predictive, you've got prescriptive, right? Prescriptive being the holy grail of analytics. We are not there yet with AI. A lot of people are trying to use AI as a prescription for business problems, for strategy problems, for financial questions, for legal questions. Look, it is great that you are using AI for research. It is great that you're using AI for note-taking. You're using AI to generate images and video. Absolutely. I find AI to be a partner for amplified intelligence and productivity. What I do not find AI good for is for prescriptive insights. This is where people fail. This is where people think, oh, you know what? If I can use AI to prescribe to me the next action, no. Let's not do that. AI is not prescriptive. LLMs were literally predicting the next word, right? If we keep that in mind, we think about AI not as a prescriptive tool, but rather as a thought partner that allows you to amplify productivity, that allows you to amplify what you are doing as a human today. Now, will that change in 3 to 5 years? Probably, but we're not there yet. That's number one. And the other thing that people do a lot, and this is something, Tom, that I always want to share with my clients, is do not apply AI to what is broken. AI will not fix what is broken. What I see companies do a lot is they say, oh, you know what? We want to fix this. We want to automate this. So we're going to throw AI at this. That's not what AI is for. Figure out your process. If that process can be done by humans without fail, and everybody understands and everybody works through that process efficiently and effectively and productively, then apply AI to it to automate it. Don't apply AI to broken things. It's not meant for that. So those are the 2 thoughts I'm going to leave you with.
Well, I love both of those thoughts, because I heard somebody say that, you know, if your culture and your process and your strategy are screwed up, AI is just going to give you a faster model of being screwed up. So I heard someone say something very similar, but the part that I thought was really the genius of what you've just said in this closing sort of section is that think of AI as a thought partner, right? It's like, think about that. That's the way I sort of use it. I'm a writer. I write a lot. I do not let AI write for me. Somebody says, well, you put out a lot of content. You know, did you just have AI write the blog post? And I say, no, I write the blog post. Then I go in and I ask it to clean up the grammar. In fact, I have sort of a joking thing is, you know, please make my 8th grade grammar teacher happy, because I never did, but don't change anything I've written other than the grammar and you know, the flow. And so it'll make little tweaks, but it still sounds exactly like I've written it. It's just my commas or my semicolons are fixed. And then the other thing I'll do is I'll ask, is there anything I left out? And lots of times it gives ideas that I think are dumb or don't fit. Every now and then it gives an idea and I go and write like a 3rd point or something like that. But I don't let it write for me. But I love the term thought partner, because that's exactly what I use it for. So that was great.
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome.
So last question. You said, hey, what we're finding is we're not ready. right? Companies aren't ready. We're not ready for AI. When do you think we're ready as a society and as a corporate,
Tom, humans are always ready and we are never ready. Right? We evolve. That's what we do as humans. And AI is a technology we have created. It's going to evolve. We evolve with it. It evolves with us. I would not ask the question when we're going to be ready. We can do everything in the right manner. For example, going back to data, building that data foundation, leveraging that for AI, right? Those are things we can do. But as far as readiness is concerned, I don't think we're ever going to be ready because AI is changing. It's evolving. We're changing. We're evolving.
I think that's an awesome way to end this. Ronnie, thank you so much for being a guest here on the podcast. If somebody wanted to find you, reach out to you, learn more, have a conversation about data and AI with you, how would they find you?
LinkedIn is the best way, or www.sunningroup.com.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. Thanks for your support of the Austin Tech community and of the Austin Tech Council. And thank you to everybody who tunes in and listens to this podcast. You know, the membership keeps growing, but the only way it grows is if you tell a friend. So go tell everyone in your company, hey, listen to this episode about AI, and maybe they'll become listeners of Austin Tech Connect. We'll see you right back here next week with a new guest.